Thank you for taking the time to join us for a quick review of what we like to call the what, the why, and the how of Microsoft 365 Business Premium. My name is Jeremy Layton, and I will be leading this presentation. Before we begin, here's a little background on myself and where I fit into the Ricoh organization. I'm the director of our strategic consulting and enterprise engineering team. I've been with the company for going on 17 years now. The first 4 years of my career, I was one of our customer-facing engineers that handled the onboarding of new clients as well as projects for our existing client base. After that, I transitioned into the manager of our customer engineering and project management team. So I was overseeing the team that I was once a member of in doing projects and onboarding for clients. Roughly 7 years ago, I formed this team, the strategic consulting and enterprise engineering team. We are responsible for some of our larger, more complex projects, as well as helping to drive some of our technology adoption and new products. So as you can see, I come from this from an engineering perspective versus a traditional sales or marketing background. The reason I'm leading this presentation is due to my hands-on experience with the Microsoft 365 Business Premium platform in both the solution development and in the real-world migrations. Additionally, I've developed a real passion for this platform after being able to see how we have implemented this for multiple organizations and the change it's made for them, the features it's enabled them to roll out that maybe they previously didn't have access to for multiple reasons, which is what we're really going to get into as we progress farther into this slide deck. But before we get too far into what we roll out and why, I would like to talk a little bit about the challenges that organizations face today. So organizations are facing new challenges as they try to accommodate the rise in the mobile workforce and the dynamic team structures that exist in today's modern businesses. This can lead to challenges in collaboration, data access, systems management, and security. Things like that really impact the in-house IT staff, impact end users, and really the security of the data within an organization because of how it's managed across multiple systems and platforms. The first thing we like to talk about here is disjointed platforms. So one of the big issues that we've really seen rise in the new normal that we live in, so to speak, is collaboration tools. If an organization doesn't have a central collaboration tool, you'll find end users using something like Zoom or WebEx, and having people leverage multiple collaboration packages can provide an inconsistent experience for employees and attendees because they're working with one person within an organization and they present one means, and the next time someone uses something different, it just doesn't have a cohesive feel for the organization. And if you don't have these type of collaboration tools, you can really have a lot of different email traffic and things that get lost in communication. Additionally, we see challenges with file sharing across disjointed platforms. So there may be no real ability to access files remotely, unfortunately, or people have to leverage a VPN or a third-party solution such as Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, and these things can have limited or no security for an organization. The next bubble that we'll kind of hit on here is the third-party applications that are leveraged in an environment, similar to the ones that I mentioned above. These third-party apps can cause security concerns due to increased management overhead, such as not being able to focus on the individual security requirements for each one of those platforms, or unfortunately, what we see a lot for organizations that don't have a centralized approach to file sharing is the use of shadow IT, where end users are not maliciously using third-party tools, but to get their job done, they're setting up a free Dropbox account or Box, or using their personal Google Drive with their Gmail account, and they're using that to share files. So all of a sudden, your valuable corporate data has been taken into platforms that you have no control over and no knowledge that it's even being used. As we move on through the challenges that organizations face, we run into dispersed resources. So as I mentioned earlier, organizations today may have to leverage multiple platforms to get the security and management that they need. Some examples of this are, let's say you would like to have a mobile device management platform to manage your iPhones and Android devices that end users use. Well, if you want that, it usually means that you have to look to a third-party solution, such as Mass 360 or AirWatch, which increases admin overhead and cost. If you would like to have multi-factor authentication or MFA or 2FA, you were traditionally looking at third-party solutions again. You would be having something like Idaptive, Duo, or Okta. And one of the larger challenges in the world today of having remote workforce is workstation management. So for years, organizations have relied on group policies or GPOs within Active Directory to manage your devices, to implement policies, security, patches, things like that. Unfortunately, in a workforce that now works remote predominantly, those group policies are relatively ineffective. They generally apply when a workstation is first turned on in the morning and it can talk to your servers. Well, now these workstations are turned on a couch or a kitchen table or someone's home office. They're not in a central location that has access back to your environment. Additionally, having all of these systems in play means that you have to have multiple accounts for multiple systems. This is both a headache for your in-house IT team that has to leverage multiple admin accounts with multiple passwords, but also for your end users. I think everybody can relate to being frustrated that they have one account to log into their car insurance, one to their bank, one to their credit card. We're now increasing that for people. And what happens is people become frustrated. They use weaker passwords, or they write them down and they have a Post-it note or even a notepad on their desktop on their computer that has their passwords in it. So that's an overall challenge. And then, as I was mentioning there, for your IT team, not just having to remember their credentials, but there's overall management overhead that just they have to control the policies within each one of these applications to make it meet your corporate needs. Lastly, on this slide, get a little bit into the mobile workforce. So as I've mentioned, people now are working more and more remote, as we all know. So how do you deploy new devices? Traditionally, people were in an office. You could have a laptop shipped to an office. Someone in that office could set it up, walk it over to Bob's desk, and have Bob sit down and start using his new machine. That's really not an option today with people being remote. A, you don't have people in the office to configure them. B, the end user's not in the office. If you don't have people together, you have to worry about passwords. Do you give someone a password or not so they can pre-configure your device? Things like that run into challenges. Beyond new device deployment, it's the previous items I mentioned for the mobile workforce. How do they get to the data? Can they get to that data? How is that data secured? Is it on a VPN? Is it through some third-party application? So these are the challenges that kind of the mobile workforce has today. In the next slide here, before we get into more around what we do and some of the challenges that Microsoft has pointed out, I want to talk a little bit about the licensing feature set and what we're talking about here. Before we get into that, there's always some confusion around licensing with Microsoft. Back in April, even before that, Microsoft really did themselves kind of no favors when they had Office 365, which I think a lot of people are familiar with hearing that. And then they rolled out Microsoft 365 back in late 2018, early 2019. It was a little confusing because people were like, well, what's the difference between Office and Microsoft? To help alleviate that, back on April 21st, Microsoft decided to consolidate names and convert everything to Microsoft 365. So while that presents its own challenges, this slide just kind of covers what you may have been familiar with versus what's real in the world today. So what used to be Office 365 Business Essentials is now Microsoft 365 Business Basic. On to the confusing ones here. What used to be Office 365 Business Premium is now Microsoft 365 Business Standard. And what used to be Microsoft 365 Business is now Microsoft 365 Business Premium. To help clarify what all of those mean, this slide is going to go through a little bit of what the feature set of each one is and kind of where they fit into an organization. So the first SKU here that organizations will see, and real quick before I get into that, there's a lot of Office SKUs out there. Microsoft 365 Business encompasses really these three SKUs and these are licenses, and these are designed to fit all organizations anywhere from 2 people to 300 people. There is a 300-person limit on these licenses. When you get above that, the SKUs licenses do change a little bit, but the features remain similar. There's just a difference in naming scheme. So most organizations, 2 people to 300, these are going to be the licenses that are going to really power your organization. The first one here is Microsoft 365 Business Basic. So Business Basic gives an end user a 50 gigabyte mailbox and it gives them access to the web-based software packages such as Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Outlook, Word, Excel, but it's all web-based. You don't have a client on your system. When you move up to the Microsoft 365 Business Standard platform, this expands on the Business Basic platform, but it really only adds one thing. And this is what we see most organizations have, though. This adds the Office suite. This gives your end users the ability to download and install the full Office suite on up to 5 devices and license it on those. And this includes your Outlook client, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the full version on your desktop, versus in the basic SKU having to log into portal.office.com and access the web version. As you move into the Business Premium SKU, there's a significant difference in what you get. So Business Premium includes everything in Business Standard, but Microsoft has taken some other licenses that they offer and consolidated them into this SKU at a discount, and they've added some additional features that you can only get in this license. So one of the important ones that's provided is it's called Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Those of you familiar with the Office world, this is what up until 45 days ago was known as Advanced Threat Protection. They just recently renamed it to fall in line with the rest of their licenses. But Defender for Office 365 is what you can leverage to secure your email. So it works against your email, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, and it has such features in it such as safe links, where it scans links that are in documents or directly in an email to see if they're directing you to a malicious site. So if an end user receives an email with a link that says, hey, we're coming from XYZ, your password for your Citrix account is about to expire, and they click it, Microsoft's going to know that that's a known malicious site, and it's not going to let that end user go there. It scans attachments in emails and any document that's in SharePoint, OneDrive, or Teams for malicious content in the document. Not just the URLs, but it looks for things like malicious macros. And it will prevent documents from being downloaded and opened to help prevent malware from getting onto your device. It gives your traditional anti-phishing, anti-spoofing, and anti-spam as well. So this would be similar to going to a third-party solution like Mimecast or Barracuda or some Proofpoint. This is Microsoft's enhanced email security, but it also expands to the other platforms in the Office suite. The next license that's really bundled into the Business Premium SKU is what's called Enterprise and Mobility E3, or EMS. This includes several different things. The first item it includes is Intune. So Intune is the software package that allows you to manage and secure Windows 10 workstations as well as iOS and Android devices, which we'll get a little bit into or more into in the presentation as we go. It includes what's called Azure Active Directory P1. So this enables all of your end users to have multi-factor authentication, self-service password reset. If you need to have an environment that has an on-premise Active Directory as well as Office 365 that are synchronized, this allows for what's called password write-back, where a user can change their password in the cloud and it writes back into your on-premise environment. And it also gives us access to conditional access. What conditional access is it allows you to secure devices based on them being compliant with patch level, not being jailbroken or rooted, running specific versions of software, and you can even do it based on geography. You can limit access from someone in a different country. It adds that with Azure, with Azure Active Directory P1. The next line item that's included in the EMS suite is Azure Information Protection. This allows for custom retention policies, and if you need to get into rights management, where you want to have users tag documents as sensitive or secure, and when these documents are tagged, you can have policies that says, hey, this document is tagged as confidential. If someone finds that document in SharePoint, it's like, hey, I need to send this over to someone to review, and they drop it in an email, it won't let them send it because it knows that document's confidential, and confidential means it can't be shared in an email. Whereas sensitive may mean it can be shared in an email, but the sender is going to get a prompt that says, are you sure you want to do this? It gives you ability to customize your data access. And lastly, for the IT folk in the house here, it includes the Windows Server CALs. What this means is if you have a business premium license, you no longer need to purchase end user CALs for Server 2019 or Exchange 2019 or SharePoint 2019. I move through those quick because ideally, if you're moving to the Microsoft 365 Business Premium platform, you're going to leverage the Office platform for your mail. You're going to leverage the hosted SharePoint solution. But what may still be beneficial is the CALs for the server license. If you do have on-prem servers, you hire 10 new employees, you don't need to buy 10 Server 2019 CALs for them because it's included in this. Lastly, there are a few features that come in the Business Premium license that are not part of other add-on licenses that you can normally purchase. One of them is you get upgrade rights to Windows 10 Pro from any device that is running Windows 7 Pro or Windows 8 or 8.1 Pro. So you no longer need to go out if you have a workforce that may still be on Windows 7 Pro or you have some Windows 8s that you rolled out. You no longer need to go and purchase, I believe it's the $99 upgrade to migrate to Windows 10 Pro. It's included in this. So any device that's running those legacy operating systems can upgrade to Windows 10 Pro. Additionally, you get what's called shared computer activation. So if you have a terminal server, Citrix Farm, VDI environment, you can install the Office suite on there, and you can activate it using your Microsoft 365 license. This was normally something that was reserved for the more expensive enterprise SKUs, such as E3, but they have included it in the Business Premium platform. And lastly, this also includes access to the Windows Virtual Desktop. In recent months, Microsoft has launched an Azure-based virtual desktop environment. This includes the license to access that. It does not include the other items that you need. Windows Virtual Desktop, I won't go into too many details, but it's built on Azure servers. So this doesn't include the server, the storage, bandwidth, things like that, but it does include the license that you actually need to have to access that solution. So now that I've covered a little bit on, or a lot maybe, on what these individual licenses are and what they include, I would like to now get into the why you should have Microsoft 365 Business Premium. The easy way to say this is it's a single license, it's a single username, it's a single management portal, and it empowers your remote workforce, and it enhances your organization's security posture, end user satisfaction, and it simplifies systems administration as well as your cost structure. In the next few slides, I'm going to cover some examples from Microsoft around why organizations should leverage this and some of the challenges that they have around remote workforce, security, end user satisfaction, and systems administration. So as we've covered here, the remote workforce is a challenge in today's world. It's the deployment and management of new workstations, mobile devices, and how you protect your data. A few key statistics from Microsoft here that I find informational are that 88% of organizations feel they're losing control of their data. 80% of employees use non-approved apps for work. This is kind of the shadow IT I mentioned earlier, where it's not malicious efforts, but it's people need to find a way to work. So they're using tools that maybe your organization hasn't approved or isn't even aware of. And 70% of organizations report having increasing difficulty managing endpoint risk. And this goes back to the fact earlier I mentioned how group policies were leveraged to manage workstations. But now that workstations aren't in an office, it's really not as effective to use something like that. As we move into security, in our ever-changing security-focused world out there, protection against the increasing number and sophistication of cybersecurity threats is an increasing challenge for organizations. And this goes back to that Defender for Office 365, formerly ATP, that helps protect against your phishing, malicious files, malicious URLs, and even weak and compromised passwords. Again, some good statistics from Microsoft here is that 94% of malware today is delivered via email. Years ago, I think back to my parents and clicking some link that took them somewhere on a website. That's not what is really impacting organizations. It's more the emails that do get through whatever platform you have protecting your email today that contain the malicious URLs or malicious content. 91% of security incidents are related to phishing. 81% of hacking-related breaches leveraged either stolen or weak passwords. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier around the fact that people have too many usernames and too many passwords. So they're using something easy or generic because it's something they can remember, or they're even writing them down or storing them on a notepad on their computer. 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses. We watch the news every day. We hear about large organizations being compromised. That's because they're big and they make the news. But a huge majority here of organizations that are compromised are small. They're the small to medium business marketplace, and you really don't hear about it just because they're not the big guys that maybe the news focuses on. So it's really something to think about. And tying into that, this was a statistic I found very interesting, was that 60% of small businesses close their doors after a cyber attack. It could be anything from litigation to trade secrets, things like that being lost. You might not think that, hey, my organization does something that we don't have any secrets, but if your data is compromised, you might not be able to recover from that. So it's really something to think about. And lastly, end user satisfaction is very important today. End users working remote, they don't have that cohesiveness of being able to walk down the hall and grab someone for help. So having a platform that's very stable, easy to leverage, and fully featured really increases the end user, or enhances the end user experience. It helps reduce the multiple usernames and passwords, helps prevent forgotten passwords. It gives them ability to access data that they may not have had access to. And it gives them a platform with Microsoft Teams and OneDrive to increase the collaboration ability that they may have lost by not being able to just go sit in the conference room or go meet at lunch while they're out having lunch because they're not doing things like that. And lastly is the systems administration. So focusing on the in-house IT team, there have been challenges implementing and supporting all of these software packages that are out there. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to have multiple tools required for MDM and MFA and encryption. It's cost prohibitive at times, it's complex, and it's just a challenge to actually manage. Managing the identities across all these platforms, as I mentioned earlier, is a challenge for both IT and for the end users. And lastly, trying to have a top-down security posture was really a challenge because of all of these tools that are needed and the cost that's involved in it. Corporations looked and said, hey, we either can't have these things or we're going to focus on workstations and not the cloud, or vice versa. Having one license that has all of these features enables you to focus on everything, to have access to securing the entire platform versus just pieces of it. So now that I've spent a lot of time covering what organizations may have felt for years, especially now after COVID, and covering the licenses and what's included in those, I would like to get into what we offer. So we at Ricoh have developed a comprehensive solution based on Microsoft best practices, the needs of multiple clients across different industries and various sizes, and we've taken this to develop this solution that's designed to address kind of the key issues that have been mentioned in the previous slides, such as the workstation deployment, workstation security, cloud security, and mobile device security. One of the first things we like to do here is to streamline and standardize the workstation-based software. So what this means is all Windows 10 workstations will be managed with the Intune agent that I mentioned earlier is included in EMS. This allows us to standardize the software install. So all the machines are going to have the latest version of Office 365. They're going to have the latest Edge browser. In the Ricoh world, we leverage a tool called Kaseya for remote device access, like sharing keyboards. We would push something like that out. Trend for antivirus, we like to push out the Chrome browser. But beyond this, we can expand to other applications that your organization needs. So if you have users that get Adobe Acrobat Pro, or if you have something like IMIS or Great Plains, these can all be packaged so that they can be pushed from a standard location to expedite new machine delivery, as well as to make sure all the machines that are out there have the same version of the same software at the same time. The next two sections here really tie together And the goal of these is to help provide data security for your end users. The first one, known folder redirection. So what this does is it is an automated process that redirects what users have in their documents, their desktop, and their pictures over to their OneDrive. So it's cached locally on the system. It's stored on their OneDrive as well. And the benefit of this is, A, they can get to that data from anywhere if necessary, but also if they're traveling and they get out of an Uber and they leave their laptop in it, their data is not lost. It has been backed up to their OneDrive. Nothing's gone. They can still get to that data. Additionally, the way I like to look at it now, having kids and dogs in the house, is if someone's sitting at their kitchen table working and a kid runs by and kicks the power cord and the laptop goes flying off the kitchen table and hits the floor and breaks. Again, the data is not lost. It has been redirected to their OneDrive for them. Enterprise state roaming ties into this. It's just a different feature set. What this does is it brings over not necessarily files, but settings. So it's going to store their desktop background. So if they have a picture of their family at Disney from before the world shut down, that's stored in Azure. So on a new machine, they're going to have that background. It stores their favorites from Internet Explorer and from Edge. It also pulls over key system settings. So if someone is a left-handed mouse user, it will store their left-handed mouse settings. Things like that are going to come over. Mouse cursor speed. It's not as necessarily as important to the organization, but it's nice for the end user that these things are stored. So on a new device, they have these same settings. A rather simple one that we like to do is we push out corporate Wi-Fi to all of the devices. Traditionally, a device would be set up in a depot or even on-site in your office. Wi-Fi would be set up, and it would be something you don't necessarily think of. But in today's world, if someone gets a laptop shipped to their house, it may not have been on your corporate network before. Someone would not have set the corporate Wi-Fi up. So eventually, if and when that employee goes back to an office, they don't have to go find someone and say, hey, how do I get on wireless? Or they don't have to call support. They're going to walk in and immediately get online and be able to go about their day's business. And lastly, a very important one here, which is a really cool feature set in the Business Premium platform, is what's called Autopilot. So Autopilot enables you to work with Tier 1 hardware manufacturers. So let's just use Dell as an example. You can order devices from Dell. You can specify that they are going to be registered with your Active Directory environment, and Dell will pre-assign them into your Azure AD tenant. You can then have that device directly drop shipped to an end user. So it's going straight from Dell to the end user versus going to your office or some sort of third-party site to configure it. That end user is going to take it out of the box. They're going to turn it on, and a streamlined version of the out-of-box experience is going to come up. So anyone that's ever bought a new computer, you turn it on, it comes up, welcome to Windows. It's going to initially make sure they get online. So they're going to have to connect it to their home Wi-Fi or plug in an Ethernet cable if they have one at their desk. But once they do that, that system knows that it is registered to your organization. It's going to check in. It's then going to realize that, okay, I don't need to prompt this person to accept our end user license agreement. I don't need them to click through what type of keyboard they want to use or if they want to add additional languages. It's going to streamline that process. And instead of prompting them to create a local account or what they want to do to set it up, it's going to welcome them to your organization. It's going to ask them to enter their username and password, which in this case is the same they use for their mail because we're using one single username and one single password that allows access to everything. Once they hit OK, beyond that, the device will register itself with Intune via some dynamic groups and some automation we have built behind the scenes. That system is going to automatically add itself to the software push groups that we mentioned earlier. So it's going to recognize, hey, this new machine doesn't have any of this. And within a few minutes, they're going to start seeing the Office suite being installed. Edge is going to install. If you're leveraging our Kaseya and Trend, it's going to install. Chrome. If default users get Adobe or different applications, they're automatically going to be installed. Because of the known folder redirection that we mentioned a minute ago, or I mentioned a minute ago, all of a sudden their data is going to come back. Anything they had on their desktop, if they had a bunch of files and folders on their desktop, they're going to start coming back down. Their pictures are going to be populated. Anything in their documents is going to come back down. With enterprise state roaming enabled, the picture of their vacation to Disney, as I mentioned, their background is going to change to that. all of their Internet Explorer and Edge favorites are going to come back down, and that device is going to get the Wi-Fi configuration. So by having something like Autopilot enabled in your environment, you are able to take IT out of the mix in provisioning new workstations. An end user with a simple one-page document with some screenshots and instructions will be comfortable in unboxing a system, setting it up on their home wireless, and running through simply logging in. And then all of this happens behind the scenes. I like to think back in August of this past year. We migrated a 400-ish person organization. They do facilities management over to Microsoft 365 from just a traditional Office SKU. And Autopilot was a big part for them because they do facilities management. They have end users all over the place. Our point of contact from this organization a few months in purchased, I believe, 90-some workstations, and he had them sent to him, a first batch sent to him for testing. He wanted to see how all of this worked, obviously, before he sent it out to his end users. And he got them, and the next morning, before I even started working, it was 7:30, 8 in the morning, I got an email from him saying how pleasantly surprised he was that he took it out of the box, he logged into it, and he said it took 10 to 15 minutes, and the device was up and running with Office and everything on it. Obviously, that time will vary depending on your internet speed. He was doing it from his office with a gig internet connection. If you're doing it from a slower connection, it will take time. But in that case, he was able to take a new machine out of a box and have it set up, logged in as an end user, data back down, and applications installed in roughly 10 to 15 minutes, which is something you traditionally won't see. You're either imaging a workstation or having someone run through the out-of-box install. So Autopilot is kind of the way of the future in provisioning devices, especially in the remote world that we live in today. Moving on from the workstation deployment, I want to talk a little bit about workstation security. Some of the features we like to roll out here are is what's called Windows Hello. So you may or may not have heard of this. Windows Hello is a feature of Windows 10. Basically what it does is it enables you to abstract your username and password from the login process by leveraging biometrics, be it an IR camera on your laptop, a fingerprint reader, or even using a PIN instead of your password. So the benefit here is users don't have to use their password to log in if they can just smile at their computer like your cell phone or use their fingerprint. And even using a PIN, what happens there is if someone is out at a Starbucks and they're sitting there, they go to log in their workstation, someone looks over their shoulder and sees what they're typing in, they're going to see them type in a 6-digit PIN, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Obviously, you can't use a simple one like that, but as an example, they're going to see them type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can't go and use that PIN anywhere else. That PIN is specifically tied to the authentication to that account on that device. Especially when you get to the biometrics, it pulls that out. So it gives an end user a way to log in without using their password, which in turn helps secure your devices from someone being able to leverage credentials to access them. The next thing we like to roll out is BitLocker. BitLocker is Microsoft's whole disk encryption platform. We leverage BitLocker to encrypt all fixed disks. So traditionally it's your C drive. Some devices may have partitions or additional drives for a D or an E. We secure all of those, leveraging BitLocker to encrypt them. That way, again, going back to the Uber example, someone leaves their laptop in an Uber, that drive is encrypted. So if that device is secured with Windows Hello, it requires a facial recognition to get in. So the person driving that Uber or the next passenger can't log into it. Great. They take it home, they pull it apart, they pull that hard drive out, and they say, you know what, I'm going to put it in a little docking station or a caddy here to read the data off of it. They can't because that data is encrypted, so it's not accessible when not logged into on that actual device. We push that out automatically for all devices, and that is part of the Autopilot deployment as well. So any device that's taken out of the box and deployed by an end user at their house, it is automatically encrypted as well. And the last thing we like to roll out is what Microsoft calls their Windows 10 baseline deployment. What this is Microsoft has reviewed the security recommendations from organizations such as NIST and CIS for what they say are the hardening standards that they feel organizations should have. Microsoft has taken their advice as well as their own security team's advice, and they have developed a hardening baseline for Windows 10 devices that they feel meets the needs of 90% of organizations out there without really negatively impacting end user productivity or satisfaction. So the goal here is to limit that attack surface without making things a challenge for end users to work or preventing things from working for an end user. Now, this doesn't get you any sort of specific compliance, but it's a great step forward in kind of limiting that attack footprint. We do kind of our own little twist on it. There are a few settings that we felt were a little too restrictive that we like to disable. Certain things are like, a good example is the baseline from NIST, CIS, and even Microsoft recommend not allowing users to save credentials in web browsers. I think everyone's used to having their username saved, or even some sites, username and password. We changed that to allow it by default, but it's something we can discuss with you. If you say, you know what, we really want to stick with the baseline, more than happy to do that, but we are not just taking the baseline at face value. We have reviewed it and kind of put our own spin on it based on experience in supporting tens of thousands of users and thousands of organizations over the years to make sure that we provide an experience that's both secure and not going to impact that user satisfaction or increase any level of frustration for your end users. The next slide here, I would like to cover a little bit around cloud security. Some of the things we like to roll out here, one of them is rather simple, but it's really the easiest way to secure your environment from a cloud standpoint, is rolling out multi-factor authentication. With the Azure AD P1 license that's included in Business Premium, we can roll out MFA, similar to getting into your bank account most likely. So end users can be simply texted a code that they type in after they try to authenticate, or they can download the Authenticator application on their phone. And what this means is if they go to portal.office.com and go to login, they can either type in a text code if they request it, or they'll just get a little pop-up on their phone that says allow or deny. And if they have a watch that supports it, like myself, I have an Apple Watch, I'll actually get the pop-up on there, and I can just hit allow, and it passes me through. So this really helps eliminate the credential theft option. It takes an extremely sophisticated attack against a core of an infrastructure to bypass something like this. The goal here is that end users have an easy way to secure their systems or access to their environment by simply having this second level of authentication. It's one of the easiest things you can do. It's very non-impactful for end users because people are very used to it nowadays, again, with their bank accounts. And I mean, I think even Facebook and things like that can require multi-factor authentication, and it really helps protect your organization. Additionally, we like to roll out email encryption. The way we do it initially for an organization is if you have it today, we'll try to mirror exactly what you have. If you don't, we set it up where you just can put a simple keyword in the subject of a message, such as bracket, encrypt, bracket. Any message that has that is forced out through Office 365 being encrypted. It's not using any type of default, what's called like opportunistic encryption, where it tries to do it. It requires it to be encrypted. End users on the other side have to have an account with access to access it, and they can simply log in and generate one to get in. But it secures that email. So if you're sending PII or HIPAA information, anything like that, you can make sure it's encrypted end to end. Another item we like to roll out is external email notifications. And no, this isn't the pop-up you get in your task tray that says you have new mail. What this is there's two ways we do it, kind of A and B. We like to roll out A and B together, but the first way we do it is in the subject message of an email, we prepend that subject with the word external. So any message that comes external from your organization says external in the subject. So an employee that looks at it says, you know what, I know this is from an external source. I'm going to be a little bit more careful in what I click, in what I open, and how or if I respond to it. The B option that we also like to do is we prepend a header to that message with a kind of generic message that says, caution, this message was received external from your organization. Please only open attachments and click links if you can verify the identity of the sender. The goal here of having both of those enabled is some people, I'm guilty of it, I catch it better when it's in the header versus in the subject. Some people see it more in the subject than they do in the header. They just jump right to the body of the message. The thought is by having both of those enabled, you're going to ideally catch the bulk of your users and they're going to say, wait a second, why am I getting a link from this person? Or, hey, I don't know this person. It doesn't look like the person that I think it is. It's a great way to just make sure your users are educated. You're not telling them to double check the sender address and this and that. They're easily able to tell that this came from external. And the last thing we implement, I'd mentioned earlier, is the Microsoft Defender for Office 365. This is what used to be Advanced Threat Protection. This gives you your safe links, your safe attachments, your anti-spoofing. There are a lot of granular settings you can enable in these features. Similar to the Windows 10 baseline, Microsoft also has a default hardening recommendation. What they've done is, again, they've looked and said, these are the settings that we feel meet the security needs of 90% of our client base out there. So we like, unless there's specific reasons your organization needs something different, we like to follow their baseline. And the real benefit there is, A, it's standardized, and B, as Microsoft detects enhanced security vulnerabilities, new ways of attack, and they modify them, you are automatically modified with the latest baseline from Microsoft. There's no retroactively having to go back and adjust something and being a few days behind after a 0-day attack or something like that. You're always up to date with the latest security recommendations from Microsoft. Again, if your organization has specific requirements for something, those can definitely be addressed. But by default, going with that 90% rule that it's going to be effective for 90% of organizations is really the key way to help secure your environment. The next slide here covers a little bit about what we like to do with mobile devices. So as our workforce has drastically changed over the years, our mobile devices have become more sophisticated. I think back years ago when I had a Trio, and all you could do was get to email on it. And it was very limited in what you could do, or a BlackBerry even had more features, but still nothing like what we have today on our iPhones, iPads, Android phones, Android tablets. People have access to a lot of your data. They can download, they can save documents, they can pull things out of SharePoint or their OneDrive. What we like to do is roll out mobile device management. Again, leveraging the Intune license that comes with the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. There have been a lot of steps forward in how mobile device management happens. Years ago, you really had to manage the full device. Now you can compartmentalize that management. So what we like to do is we configure a policy where an end user downloads what's called the company portal, which is really the Intune application. They log into it. It's going to simply validate that their device is not rooted or jailbroken, which means it doesn't adhere to the security standards for Android or iOS. They're going to validate the device has a passcode on it. That passcode could also be, everyone has a passcode essentially if you enable it, but even if you have fingerprint reader, facial recognition, there's still a passcode behind that. So you're still able to use the facial recognition on your iPhone, the fingerprint reader on the back of your Android device. All of that is still available for the end user. But we verify the device is not jailbroken or rooted. We make sure that they have a passcode on it or one of those biometric means. And then after that, we push down the company software that you need to run. We push down the Outlook client, Word, Excel, OneDrive, Teams. If you're leveraging SharePoint, we push down the SharePoint application. We'll push down the mobile authenticator application I was talking about, where an end user gets the prompt to allow or deny access. And because these applications are pushed down via Intune, they are inherently managed by that. Excuse me. And what that means is those applications can compartmentalize data. So if someone receives an email with an invoice on it for a client and they click on it, you know what, it'll open in Word, they can view it, but if they hit that save button, say, hey, you know what, I need to save this for later. When they hit save, they can only save it to their OneDrive or to SharePoint. They can't save it to their local phone storage. They can't save it to their personal Dropbox account. That data has to be maintained within these applications. Now, you can ingest data from elsewhere. So if someone goes to a website and needs to pull something in, or if they take a picture and need to attach a picture to an email, anything can go into these corporate managed applications, but data can't come out of it. So this helps secure your company data because you know people aren't pulling data out of SharePoint and taking it elsewhere on their phone. And at the same time, this allows for a granular wipe of their device. So in the event you have to let someone go or someone loses their phone, from the Intune portal, you can remove company data. What this does is it doesn't remove the applications, but the next time they go to open OneDrive to get to a file, it's simply going to say that the data has been removed and access to this application has been revoked. The same thing will happen if they go to SharePoint or go to Outlook. The corporate data is gone, but it's not going to impact the pictures of their Disney vacation, as I keep going back to. It's not going to impact their Facebooks and their Instagram. It doesn't touch anything else on their device other than your corporate managed applications. Additionally, if someone used Outlook, we push down Outlook. Let's say they want to use Outlook to have their Gmail account and their Hotmail account in it. They can add their Gmail, they can add their Hotmail. The data is still compartmentalized, but when you issue that remote wipe, their Gmail and their Hotmail stay, only the corporate account is removed. So you're not even limiting their access to these applications for other things. If they say, hey, I want to use Outlook for my personal email, or I need to use Word on here for my personal stuff, they still can use it for everything. But your company data is compartmentalized in it, and it's easily removable in the event that you need to do it. So where does Ricoh fit into helping you get to this? I'd like to think we've covered a lot of great things here, and the value that Business Premium brings, the comprehensive solution that we can set up for your organization. How can we help you get there? So Ricoh will work with you through the kind of get ready process. This is really where we sit down and help review the wants and needs of your organization. We like to review what current systems you have in place today, such as shared data. Do you have home drives? Do you have corporate shared drives? Do you have a SharePoint environment? What local on-premise type applications that you have and how they authenticate? What SaaS applications do you have? Do you have a Salesforce or a Trello that you leverage out there? And how are those authenticated? A lot of times those applications are going to have their own username and password. Going back to the beginning, one of the great things about being in the Microsoft platform is it's all built upon Azure Active Directory. And most SaaS applications, again, Salesforce or Trello, something like that, they can authenticate against Azure Active Directory. So we could work with you to plan a migration over of authentication using Azure AD. So again, this goes back to that one username, one password for your end users. Makes your end user life easier. Makes the admin job easier as well, because in the event you have to let someone go, you disable one account, you change one password, and access to those systems are gone. You no longer have to go and jump into multiple systems. You don't need to go to Dropbox, go to Active Directory, go to Trello, go to Salesforce. One username, one password, one account to manage access on. And we also help develop a detailed project plan outlining how we get from where you're at today to where we are trying to get you, including what happens with your shared data, what happens with this authentication, what happens with local applications. We then can move into the migration phase, where we can assist you with workstation replacement. We can assist in up and 8 systems to Windows 10 Pro, and then we will work to configure and test all of the features that we have covered here. Everything that I have gone through, from the workstation deployment, workstation security, cloud security, mobile device security, we will configure it, test it, demo it, provide end user documentation, and then we can work with you through the migration process, getting end users cut over and supported on this platform. And lastly, I guess tying into that onboarding is us handling that portion for you, helping to migrate PCs and mobile devices to the new platform. We'll work with you for end user support after type of a migration like that. So if we come in and say, hey, Monday, we're going to spend Monday working with your staff cutting over, we can have a team dedicated to assisting your users on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. That's part of our onboarding process. We like to assist with the end user adoption of these solutions, making sure that people are understanding how to use Teams, and really what the benefit is and how they should be leveraging it. If you're leveraging SharePoint, we can help make sure users understand how to use it and show them the benefits of it so that they really adopt to it and don't just feel like, you know what, I know how to do this differently. I'm going to keep doing it the way I once did. And the same goes for OneDrive, making sure that people are leveraging it, teaching them the benefits of using it, and answering any questions. And then we can provide ongoing support and administration of this complete platform, from the workstation provisioning to OneDrive and SharePoint. We can come in and kind of be your one-stop shop for everything related to onboarding and support of your entire IT infrastructure, included but not limited to just the Microsoft 365 Business Premium. In summary, partnering with Ricoh will enable your organization to rapidly take full advantage of the latest features in the Microsoft 365 Business Premium stack to aid in simplifying your IT infrastructure while increasing its functionality and end-user satisfaction. The process of planning, implementing, testing, and migrating will be conducted by senior engineers and project managers who have executed this exact process countless times. While we do have this very comprehensive solution, we are also going to work with you to make sure that it fully meets your organization's needs. We feel this solution meets the needs of a lot of organizations that are out there, with the features that we roll out that maybe once were unobtainable due to maybe not having the amount of IT staff necessary to implement and support it, or due to the prohibitive cost nature of multiple tools. We will make sure that you have access to what your organization needs, and it's configured the way that meets those needs and wants. Lastly, we hope this presentation was informational. We are going to move over to Q&A, so please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We will compile those quickly and move into Q&A momentarily.
All right, we've had a few questions come in so far. I'm going to take a few minutes here and go through them. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in chat. I'll start off with one of the earlier ones that we received. It was around the licensing aspect. So if you have more than 300 users, am I correct that you will want to move to the Microsoft 365 Enterprise version rather than Business? That is correct. So the business SKUs, as mentioned, really have a 300-person cap on them. When you get over 300 users, that's when you would move into the Microsoft 365 E1, E3, or E5 licenses. They include slightly different features. The closest one in comparison to Business Premium would be E3. E5 adds on some telephony and some of the advanced Azure AD Plan 2 licensing. E1 does not include the Office license and a few other things. So yes, over 300 seats, you're going to move into the enterprise licensing. And there's a lot of different licensing out there as well. So if you're a school-based systems, there's corresponding A1, A3, A5. Government contractors can look at G1, G3, and G5. But in the enterprise world, its Business Premium does kind of move up to the E1 license. The next question we had here is, can known folder redirection work with OneDrive for Business on a virtual desktop or on a terminal server? I believe it can, and the way you would do it, there's not a direct Intune method to do it, but you would have OneDrive set up on your terminal server or your remote desktop. It will be able to run in a on-demand mode, so it's not going to download all of their OneDrive. The last thing you want is all of your users' OneDrive downloading onto your terminal server. It will be on demand, so as they access a file, it will pull it from the cloud, access it. When they close it, it will go back up to OneDrive. It won't stay local. And you would leverage a traditional group policy setting in your Active Directory world using what's called known folder move. And that does the same concept of redirecting your desktop documents and pictures over to OneDrive. That way users can have access to those items. Another question here, is Autopilot only available from OEMs, or are there other vendors like CDW that can offer it? So at Ricoh, we support working directly with OEMs that leverage or that support Autopilot. Dell definitely does. When you're going through someone like Dell, when you're quoting out and designing your laptop and you're picking what hard drive and CPU and RAM, there's actually an option directly in there to configure it with Autopilot. You put in your company information and your order will be placed that way. I cannot comment directly on CDW, but I do know Ingram Micro supports Autopilot. One of the organizations we work with likes to leverage HP hardware. HP does not directly use Autopilot or support Autopilot, So going through Ingram was able to take HP devices, register them with Autopilot, and drop ship them out in the same manner. So CDW, you may have to check with someone like that, but Ingram definitely does include it. Another question here is, does a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license cover a user's remote desktop or terminal server CAL? No, it does not. So the Business Premium license comes with the EMS E3, which then includes your CALs for Server 2019, on-prem SharePoint, and on-prem Exchange. It does not include remote desktop licenses. In the Microsoft world of today, the kind of cloud-first model, Microsoft is really pushing organizations to leverage their new hosted virtual desktop. So in Azure, you could spin up a hosted virtual desktop, and Microsoft 365 Business Premium does include the license to utilize that hosted virtual desktop. I emphasize it includes the license because just like having your own terminal server farm in-house, you still have to have the compute and the storage. So while the license is included, it does not directly include the hardware costs. So if you need to build out a B3 server that has X amount of CPU, RAM, and storage, you still have to pay for that server, you still pay for the storage, and you pay for the egress data and backup, but the license to leverage virtual desktop is included. This next question is tying into the mobile device management. Is the company portal the same as the company intranet or hub page on SharePoint? No, it's not. The company portal is just an app in the App Store. So you can bring up your App Store on your iPhone or Android device, and you can just search for company portal. I wish they called it just Intune, but it's company portal, and that is what allows the device to be managed via Intune. It does not tie directly into SharePoint. Now you can publish applications in that. So as I talk through this presentation, we like to push down a core set of apps, the Outlook, the Word, Excel, OneDrive, Authenticator for MFA, the things people are going to need. But if your organization says, hey, we also leverage these other couple applications, but not everybody needs them, you can publish the applications but not assign them. What that means is those applications could show up in the company portal so that people that need them could click on them and have them downloaded, kind of in an on-demand method. So you can make people have the apps that they need, and other apps can be optional based on the role that someone actually has in the organization. Next question, regarding the Windows baseline deployment, can you deploy a CIS-based image or a mix of CIS, NIST, and other settings? So Microsoft created their own baseline. They used CIS and NIST as recommendations in how they create and manage their baseline. Their baseline is not directly NIST or CIS compliant. Their goal was to come up with something that really fit the needs of, I think I said 90% of organizations that are out there without being too restrictive. So what happens here in this case is that baseline is fully customizable. I had mentioned we make a few tweaks to it ourselves. Certain things we feel are a little bit too restrictive. You can take that baseline and then you can modify it as needed. So if you need to restrict something else a little bit more to fall more in line with a NIST, a CIS, or a specific compliance that you have, you can definitely do that. Or if you say, look, we like this, but there's a couple things that are too restrictive. One of the ones I used, I think I mentioned it a minute ago, was it prevents people from saving their username and password on web pages. Some organizations may love that, but from an end user perspective, I think it might drive people crazy not being able to do that. So those types of things can be turned on and off as needed. And the last question here is, can our employees use their personal computers to access the functions through 365? Can they just log into their computer account? How about Macs? Yes, end users can log right in to the Microsoft portal. You would go to portal.office.com. Ideally, they would be prompted for multi-factor authentication, and then they would have access to everything over the web. They would have the web version of Word, Outlook, Excel. They can get to their OneDrive. If they want, they can download the Office suite, if you allow them, but it's technically available. They can download the Office suite on their device and activate it, because Business Premium allows an end user to activate Office on up to 5 devices. So yes, end users can definitely access all the corporate data from their home or personal machines. I know that might sound a little bit unnerving at some level, but that also can be restricted. So part of the same license that we use for conditional access that controls and manages a mobile device, you're not necessarily going to be controlling or managing their personal device, but you could enable conditional access that says, no, we only want people to be able to get to these web portals from managed devices. So if you decide, look, we don't want to have everybody able to get to everything from their personal device, that is something that you can change as needed via conditional access. I believe that is all the questions that we have right now. If anything else comes in, please feel free to ask it. Otherwise, I think we are done. If anyone has any questions, we look forward to hearing from you.